are these people?
Pasta from Combo Couch had an excellent interview with Cornel West yesterday, and I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple key points on it because he was actually calling him out.
The other day, but I guess I could talk a little bit more in detail. This was kind of like a train wreck. I think we're all willing to kind of admit at this point it was kind of a little bit of a disaster. But granted, Pasta is a bit of a fiery one. He's
well, it wasn't like he was antagonizing Cornel West.
He's a genuine interviewer, is what I mean by that. He's like, he's not gonna throw any softballs. He's gonna get down to the bottom of it as best as he can. That's why he asked RFK Jr., despite Pasta's blinders to RFK sometimes. He confronted him with the Israel question about why he deleted the tweet with Roger Waters. So he's willing to confront candidates, that are.
Well, he understands that the role of a journalist is to be adversarial to power. His job is to not be friends with Cornel West, even though they have a cordial relationship, I'm sure. His job is to ask the questions that the people want to know. That
should be your role.
And again, like Pasta just had an awesome interview the whole time. I don't think there was any moments where Cornel West was offended because I think he was really respectful about the questions that he was asking.
I think they were both genuine. They were both pretty genuine.
So let's start with actually, you can start with 19. Go to 1905.
19.
We're skipping a little bit.
There's some
so fair warning. Like, as you guys know about Cornel West, he likes to talk a lot. But this first question is basically asking him about his Trump derangement, which I think is really important because
he has this this Diet Cola version of it where he calls Biden and milquetoast neoliberal. And a Trump
and Trump's the fascist, the neo-fascist,
which is it delivers the Democratic version of that on this plate for you that makes it more tasteful, more palatable for you. That makes it seem like there's a better option than the neo-fascism.
Well, and that's the thing, and Pasta does a good job kind of calling him out on it.
Pasta brings evidence of the opposite.
Yep. He even says, if you put a gun to my head and I had to choose between Trump or Biden, I'm going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Which I think, was completely wrong. If you told me today, and I'm never going to vote for Biden, I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump, but if you put a gun to my head, Dr. West, and said I had to vote for either one of the two, I'm voting for Donald Trump. We're on the brink of World War III here now. Can you see the hypocrisy there? And can you maybe square that circle right there and kind of give us a little insight to this whole Biden gets this treatment, but Trump gets that treatment?
Yeah, one is that we could have been on the brink of World War III with Trump too. Anybody who's head of a militaristic and aggressive empire can lead the world toward war. He could have been with North Korea. There's all kinds of different possibilities in that.
He talks
regard.
like a
so if we use solely the possibility of nuclear holocaust, nuclear exchange,
he's
the head of any empire, when it comes to the most powerful empire in the history of the world, the United States, it could be Trump or Biden in that regard. No, I think part of the difference here is the difference between a catastrophe and a disaster. Is that
all right? So we can. That's all. I just wanted to give a little nibble of it. I just wanted to show, once again, Cornel West giving a non-answer because it's really indefensible. I think kind of Pasta presses a little bit on some key points where who was the one who didn't start any wars when he was president and stuff like that. But it's definitely a point that. The point really for asking that question is just to kind of show and show this little segment is just to show that Cornel West really needs to kind of be a little bit more open to recognizing that the duopoly is all encompassing, and that means that they're all fascists, and it's not like one's more fascist than the other. And I hope over time, Cornel West kind of adapts to being, not to say that he's like favorable to the Democrats by any means, but he clearly has a position that's more pro-Democrat than neutral. I'll put it that way. And I think like Pasta was kind of trying to tease it out of him, being like, come on, like why, like how do you make that comparison? And at the end of the day, I think Pasta makes a good argument that Trump was probably the lesser evil if you really want to play that game.
I feel like this is like de-propagandizing in real time. This was like, because I'm not one to like ascribe dishonesty to Cornel West. I'm not gonna do that, but I can obviously see he is very stumped on this question, and he has to talk in a way that doesn't make him look, ineffective or that he doesn't know what he's talking about.
It's that you can kind of almost see the cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh shit, Pasta has some really good points.
Yeah.
And he even kind of tries to separate.
He's twisting his own mind right now in his head in real time.
You can see he's kind of trying to stretch it between like, well, you're comparing, do you want to compare how they are on social issues versus, imperial issues? And he tries to kind of like make it more nuanced than it really is. And the bottom line is that like I think Cornel West just kind of took the establishment Kool-Aid a little bit too liberally over the last few years. And it shows, I think, honestly, his Trump derangement shows kind of lack of being properly educated on what's really going on and probably taking too much of the establishment Kool-Aid. I don't know. Cornel West, the way he speaks always comes across to me as someone who's speaking earnestly. So I don't like to suggest that he's speaking dishonestly. I think that it's too soon to tell to see if like the ulterior motives and stuff that are going to start popping up. I just think that he has Trump derangement. And that comes from just being around too much establishment media. This is a really good question too. So Pasta asked a great question, like why, how can you expect to have detente with Putin if you're calling him a gangster and all this shit? So we can play it out. 26-42.
Nick actually confronted, he said this after the Cornel West interview on RBN, and expressed concern about Cornel West's language, which sort of here in this foreign policy aspects, like in many ways mimics mainstream media, which is concerning because it's like you said, like when you're sitting at the negotiation table, I think Pasta talks about it too, you need to be able to talk with these people and have, like, if you've had like a long-standing record of you saying gangster thug over and over again.
Exactly.
What do you think? How do you think you're gonna have a negotiation with them? But
that's actually, I think that's actually this question. But yeah,
like nuclear holocaust. And
go
Joe
about
Biden,
30 seconds ahead.
A lot closer to that. That's Newland.
Manifest.
Yeah.
In how
he got rid of her though. He did fire her.
Parties doing different administration.
Yeah, he did fire. Well, let's get into, because I want to talk a little bit about the same language we kind of use towards the neo-fascists, the problem I think you could have, and I'm glad you explained that. But I'm a little bit bothered by that same language towards Vladimir Putin. Putin's a thug. Putin's a gangster. I mean, if you're going to be the president of the United States, how are you going to sit down with a man across from you who you're supposed to getting rid of nuclear weapons and try to convince him of that? How are you going to talk peace when you're saying, and I want the plain and simple, this question: did Vladimir Putin have a choice to do what he did in Ukraine? Because I don't think people are kind of really talking about the crux of what's going on. I don't know if people understand. Do you think that Vladimir Putin had a choice to not go into Ukraine?
Well, I appreciate the question, though, brother, because, I mean, you got a number of different levels here. First thing to keep in mind is that you've got American imperial provocation with the promise that NATO would not move 1 inch toward Russia. The American empire reneged on that promise. A number of decades later now, 13, 14 countries are now part of NATO, which were formerly associated with the Soviet Union. So it's very clear that that is a massive provocation. I've said on many, many, many occasions that if there were missiles in Mexico or Canada, the United States government would blow them to smithereens. Why? Because empires behave that way, and America is an empire. Now, there's no equivalency between the Russian Empire and the American Empire in terms of power. There's no doubt about that. There's no equivalency at all. But at the same time, there's also...
Actually, there is. I think Russia's got her ass handed to us at this point. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument there.
They're militarily stronger than ever. Putin has a 70% approval rating, not only there, but in the western part of Ukraine. The support for this war is degrading as time goes on, and everyone is realizing how, like, as more and more money gets sent over there, more and more people are realizing, when is it? What's the point of all this? When is this? And Vladimir Putin actually, like, did you see that today? Where Vladimir Putin, he showed a signed peace agreement.
Yeah,
between him and Ukraine in April of 2022.
I'm assuming that's the one that Boris Johnson put the kibosh on.
The fact of coming out of the KGB and a whole host of other trajectories of Putin himself, maybe calling him a gangster or calling him I've never used the word thug, calling him a gangster might be viewed as just some kind of symbolic gesture to the liberal and neoliberal circle. But I'm concerned about Russian brothers and sisters, just like I'm concerned about Ukrainian brothers and sisters, just like I'm concerned about anybody else. And when you have mechanisms of repression anywhere, I'm going to call that into question. So that all
right, that's probably a good place to pause that. So I just wanted to show. So he doesn't really have an answer there. But what's interesting is that Cornel West, he's like, we know he's an anti-imperialist from the way that he speaks in how relationship to how empires, like, how they function. He kind of has an understanding there of how global conflict works. So he admits that NATO provoked, okay? But he still says that what Russia did was, with their invasion, was a crime against humanity. So, we can have a whole discussion on whether, and Pasta kind of goes into it a little bit, tries to tease it out a little bit, but we can go into a whole discussion onto whether there was justification for Russia to cross into Ukraine, but
and it really sucks that we're able to, like, be able to apply this terminology, like crimes against humanity, for something.
Yeah, and I think that's like a disingenuous.
America does, like, dropping fucking drone bombs every day for your entire presidency is not the same thing as taking up protecting like a couple of Russian civilized areas.
Well, and I think that's the argument
over it.
It's
and
like
then
what I was saying,
having peace agreements in the background, and then also not, like, Putin would have Ukraine by now if it wasn't for it. Like, if it wasn't for whatever patience he has left, Putin would have taken the entirety of Ukraine by now.
Well, I think he's doing the same thing that the U.S. is kind of trying to do with Russia, just the attrition, just take out, demilitarize Ukraine.
That's also partially what it is that, like, there's an infinite weapon supply to this small, tiny country that, like, normally wouldn't stand a chance. I mean,
here's the thing.
There's a lot of significance in Ukraine from Russia.
The ideal, I think the person who has of all the candidates running against Biden right now, okay, other than I will say, Trump said he would get us out of Ukraine within 24 hours. So that's a powerful statement, and I'm not going to discredit him because that's a great statement. However, RFK, of the people who are running, who are considered on the left, he was the only one who really has the same position as, like, the lefties in terms of Ukraine. He did show some evolution since his presidential campaign in having a more openness to recognize that, like, we really instigated this shit. Cornel West, I don't know where his, like, how he can say that's like, oh yeah, well, NATO increased like another 13 countries into NATO when we said we were going to stop, in East Germany, and that never happened. So I don't know how you can, on the one hand, recognize NATO encroachment and recognize that that's like an existential threat to Russia, and then at the same time say that what Russia did is a crime against humanity because it defended itself. So maybe that's just my perspective. Like, I just think that you can't have it both ways like that. If you're going to recognize NATO encroachment, then you have to recognize that Russia at that point has the right to defend itself, even if that means defending itself within Ukraine's borders. And I think Cornel tries to both sides it a little bit. And I think that's a little disingenuous. I think with something like this, it's good to have.
I mean, we can just sit here and come up with reasons in our head. Like, is it like ignorance or is it?
No, I think he has some Russophobia. I think Cornel West is a bit of a Russo. You know, it could be some like Cold War propaganda shit, but I think he just is like anti-Russia.
Just hitting the Kool-Aid.
14 countries now with U.S. missiles right on the borders of the Russian Empire. Putin's back is against the wall. Now, I view invasion and occupation of any country, the violation not just of national sovereignty, I view it as a crime against humanity. So that the question becomes, you got a larger U.S. American imperial backdrop, pushes the Russian Empire against the wall. He responds with this invasion and occupation. And what do I call for? Ceasefire, stop the war, sitting down with Putin, sitting down with the Chinese, sitting down with the Turks, sitting down with the Ukrainians to generate a diplomatic strategy or diplomatic process to stop the suffering. I am concerned about the suffering of Ukrainian brothers and sisters. I'm in solidarity with the Russians who are actually going against the war, because that takes courage. But that doesn't mean that we downplay the role of the American imperial project. NATO historically,
most Russians, like, if you go there, they support the war. Like, they want it to keep going. Most people, and it's not like out of like, it's like out of like these are not like bloodthirsty citizens of Russia. Like, they're like, this is not just like how.
No, but I would think that if I was in Russia, I would see NATO. If I was a citizen of Russia, I would see NATO as an existential threat. Exactly. Yeah. So it'd be like, oh yeah, NATO wants to get Ukraine. Of course, we're gonna do what we have to do.
Yeah, like, how high was George W. Bush's approval rating during the Iraq War?
I don't know.
Well, not George W. Bush. Like, wars, like, when they begin, increase your approval rating, don't they?
They can, because they galvanize the citizenry.
Usually, that's what I'm saying. Like, they galvanize support. I mean, that's what essentially. Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's what's occurring here in Russia. For, you know, what is, in this case, both of them admit, valid, noble.
I think also at the same time, though, I think we can look at this objectively, and you can see pretty clearly that the U.S. and Ukraine are the aggressors in this situation. I think if you're like being honest about it, and I think that I'm sorry, I think the anti-imperialist take is to be like, yeah, we were the aggressors and Russia did what Russia had to do. I don't think saying that they like.
I'm actually, I am kind of lost in the nuance of like, and how criminal is Russia? Like, how bad are they?
Well, exactly? Here's the thing that drives me crazy.
I don't think Putin's a good guy, but I also don't think he's like a gangster either. I just see him as like any other
dude. He's just protecting. He's doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, like, what would, like,
the thing that bothers me when people say that there were other alternatives, you know, like, that's implying that you have better intel than fucking Putin. You know, if you think there were alternatives, like try and imagine for a half a second that you're Putin prior to February 2022, and you know that you will be vilified by every Western country the second that you cross over into Ukraine's borders. You know that's going to happen. You know you're going to be vilified permanently. and you do it anyway, he must have known that that was the best case scenario. You know, that's the thing that blows my mind is like one of the things that like Aaron Mate, he has a huge critique of Putin, saying that he should negotiate, he should have did like stop sending energy, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Putin went through probably 100 different things he could have done prior to crossing over into Ukraine's border. You know, there's no doubt in my mind.
Donbass was sitting there for 8 years begging to come in.
8 years, and they had 2 Minsk Accords. Like it wasn't like Putin was like bloodthirsty dying across the border.
No, they spent 8 years going back and forth avoiding this, like trying not to have this happen. So like I am struggling, truly struggling to see the nuance for the Ukraine flag bios and like to see like where Russia is so criminally wrong in this case. Like I don't see like how they're equally bad.
People just make the
quality here. Like to even make the comparison between the US and Russia is just like so false. I can't.
It's like there's a hard red line that as soon as you cross another country's borders, that automatically makes you the bad guy in spite of like the historical significance of everything that happened beforehand.
Yeah,
like it's
I don't know why that is.
Like obviously he wouldn't have crossed into Ukraine if like the series of events leading up to it didn't happen. So I don't know. I don't know. I feel strongly that like he was kind of pushed up against a wall, but that's like a whole nother subject. So I guess let's go to this one's interesting. Go to 4258. I was gonna do the immigration one, but we can skip that one. Since we're allowed to talk about the elections again, and about 4258 perfect.
Stolen, baby. Oh, that's spicy. It rolls off the tongue. 2020 election was stolen. What are you gonna do about it, YouTube? All right.
Yeah, perfect. So this one he asks, like, was the election 2020 elections fair? Like, simple question.
But does democracy matter if we do not have a fair and transparent election system? So my question to you right off the bat is, and this is my area of expertise. I am an election integrity expert. I've gone over to other countries, Latin America, and seen fair, transparent elections.
This is true.
In your
Pasta
mind,
goes to other countries and he monitors elections.
Fair.
Pasta, I would consider, if anyone, an election expert.
Yeah, expert.
This is the man who is.
I would love to pick his brain once we start getting a little bit closer to.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, yeah, he knows a lot
because here's the thing, and he goes into it with Cornel. He's like, listen, Cornel, like, he speaks very affirmatively. Like, the elections are bullshit in this country. You need to get ahead of it and understand that the elections are bullshit if you think you're going to come out of this alive.
So close, yeah.
See, I don't think that any election in the United States meets the highest levels of fairness, giving the role of big money that selects candidates already before people even go to the voters' booth. And when they go to the voters' booth, they're choosing between two parties that themselves are already captive to corporate wealth.
Which is correct. Joe Biden.
No, he's right. But
way
like
more money than Donald Trump.
The big difference here is that Cornel West correctly says that there's institutional fraud. Like, the elections are picked by the corporations, the elections are picked by the oligarchs. Like, that's we all agree with that for the most part. There's data to support the fact that we're, I think we've seen that thing where there's the graph that shows that if everybody, like, if we actually lived in a democracy, then like bills would get passed the way that they're supposed to. But the way that it is with us being in an oligarchy,
the Princeton study,
the Princeton study that like the odds of something getting passed is about 30%. It's all up to amount of money that gets put into it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is that like Cornel West is right that there's like an institutional rigging. Yes, like we can talk about Bernie all day. What he won't recognize, and we'll keep playing it just because I think Pasta's the expert and does a good job on this, but he doesn't recognize that there's rigging or fraud at the booths. Okay, he thinks that happens by like you know, the people getting chosen, you know, and kind of like the ordained presidents.
Now, is it fair in the very, very narrow sense of a majority of the votes or most of the votes being counted and then reported as they're counted? Now there, I think one can make a strong case. This is where I would have deep disagreements with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is thoroughly convinced that the very votes that were put forward were not counted at all. Now, when he talks about the election being rigged in the structural and institutional sense, well, that's a different issue, because we can.
Where
talk
do you
about
stand on that?
There's no doubt that the very fact that we could have two parties for so long that are tied to the same Wall Street Pentagon interests means there is a quality of it being rigged. When I supported Brother Bernie Sanders in 2016, 2020, the Democratic Party rigged it against him. There was no way he could win. And when we were winning, as you might recall in Nevada, and Brother Obama makes the phone call to have all the neoliberal politicians drop out, Pete and Amy and company. Why? Because they said nobody, or put it this way, Bernie will never win. There's no way he will win. But that's what you call rigged. But that's a structural and an institutional rigging that's very different than votes that are put forward and votes that are counted.
Okay,
and that's
let me stop you really quick, Dr. West, because
very much so.
I listen, I agree with that part. There's the political part, the way we can use the media, we can sway the media. We saw with the WikiLeaks drops. But what can you, Dr. West, because this is an area where it's going to come back to haunt you if you don't get ahead of this when it comes to the election process itself. Do we have a fair process itself? Because let me explain to you, in Nicaragua, you have 1 day of voting. It's on a Sunday. You must show up at your designated election spot, your precinct, with ID. It takes about 10 minutes to vote. Where the vote is cast, it is counted. There's no proprietary software there. So what I'm trying to say, ask you too, is what we talk about Fannie Lou. She was an election activist.
Neo-fascist leader. Brazil's the same way. It's counted. Digitally.
I was in Brazil, so I know about it. But this election system we have here today, because you're a Green Party member now, right? So you're running as a Green. You don't have to worry about this whole.
Yeah,
okay. Is the process of the election fair?
I don't think it is fair in the structural and institutional sense of what an election really should be. No, I don't.
Good. What area would you tackle first?
Well, first, I would make sure on a very minimal level that, that the citizenry has time to vote, national holiday. Each vote goes in immediately without having to be mediated with a whole host of other entities and persons. But then I would have, my critique of campaign financing, and to make sure that persons' votes that go in are not confined to just
all right, go to 48
politicians of two parties, both parties being tied to corporate interests. And we can learn something from those countries that are able to count their ballots. We learn something.
Well,
there you go.
Do you think we should have mass mail-out ballots?
I think we can learn something from those countries that are able to count their ballots within hours because of the mediated with the computers that actually work and computers that allow for transparency. Yes.
See, here's my recommendation. We have to eliminate mass mail-out ballots. If you want to get a mail-out ballot, if you are handicapped, you can't go. If you're a military person, you can't go. So be it. But every election, you should have to re-register for that mail-in ballot. It should be like you said, voter holiday. All these countries I went to, it's a Sunday.
All of them. They're interested in their citizen participating.
Yeah. And they all must have ID when they go to their designated voting precinct. This whole vote center makes it impossible to audit an election. But it's also very rapid. You get in and you get out. You don't have to wait for hours in lines. It's almost like they broke the system so they can purposely move people in the mail-in ballots, because with mail-in ballots, you don't need to necessarily generate a voter. You just have to generate a ballot. And with ballot harvesting now, right, when a person can drop off thousands of ballots and then drop boxes, you don't know where these ballots are coming from. There's zero chain of custody. Not to mention the way that Brother Bernie got cheated in the first time in 2016. It was cheated on the back end. We have proprietary software counting these ballots, meaning we, the people who fund this election,
that's
can't
probably
even open up the hood and look at the car and the engine.
The election part. So I just like Pasta kind of dropping knowledge on that stuff. That's why I don't let him talk, because I think he's absolutely right. You know, people love to make such a big deal, like having an ID to vote is supposed like some taboo thing. Like all the countries that have really like lockdown voting and transparent voting all require people to show their ID at the time of voting, and they don't do mail-ins. So I think they're very reasonable. I think Cornel is just either pretending or just truly believes that like when we cast ballots that they actually get counted correctly. So I think this is more of a moment of Pasta just kind of like giving Cornel West a little bit to think about, rather than Cornel West having like a good answer on that. Because these are things that he's right that you're going to have to get ahead of. You like I'm 110% positive that the fuckery that's going to take place next year for the elections is going to be so unprecedented. You're going to have people like RFK, and maybe Cornel West is going to start polling well out of the blue, but RFK is going to poll over 50-60% without any primaries, without any debates. And like the amount of fuckery that's going to go in to make sure that Biden still wins is going to be ridiculous.
Oh, it's going to be the same thing as last time. They're already calling in the unions. They called in those 17 unions that came out full struck.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And they didn't none of those organizations allowed people to respond to their posts because they'd be like, oh, you guys are a bunch of sellouts. He like, I listened to this right before we did this, so I don't think he says anything that's going to be
other alternatives was shut down. Let's play this video over here right now, because we need an explanation. We got to get out in front of this if we are going to handle this, because if you do want to talk to those conservative people, this is an issue high on their charts. Take a listen.
Yes. Go ahead, Cornel.
It just strikes me that part of the problem, and what a blessing to just be in conversation with you, though, brother. What a great exemplar of integrity, honesty, and decency you have been over your 79 years on the globe. But it just seems to me there's a spiritual decay in the country in terms of people just not caring about each other, people not being concerned enough about each other. How does one deal with that as a scientist? And it just strikes me as you have been very distinctive as a scientist, because you're so deeply grounded in humanity and humanitarian sensibility, grounded in a Jesuit education, grounded in all that love coming out of the Italian-American communities going back to the old country. How do you deal with that spiritual decay? Because you can say what you said on TV over and over again, but if our fellow citizens don't care enough for each other, what then do you do, my brother?
Yeah, well, Dr. West, you bring up a very good point.
Okay, so this one is upsetting because number one, I don't know how we got to the conclusion that Dr. Fauci is any type of kind person. He has had.
How does something like that get set up, by the way? Like, where kind of interview?
What's that?
Where, like, what did you? Does anyone know where that's from? Or
it looked like the Real News. That clip.
Dr. Fauci was on the Real News.
Apparently.
Network.
Yeah, the Real News Tightrope. I don't know if that's like a show on the Real News, but I don't know. But there's Cornel West having a really dog shit take.
Because the AIDS pandemic, right? What that did to our gay community, how it made them suffer. They made a movie about it, the Dallas Buyers Club. I mean, he almost did the same thing with the AIDS pandemic he did with COVID, where he didn't allow other alternatives, other medicines to get out there. But the thing that really upset me more than anything, Dr. West, and I know you know this because you talk about COINTELPRO, you understand the intelligence community. If I can create a situation in what you do to your body affects me, I have the ultimate divisive weapon out there possible. That statement you made was very, very divisive, because it wasn't that we didn't love each other. It's that we weren't able to have a conversation about it. And I can go on about masks, how bad they are. But do you regret these comments, and do you regret kind of uplifting Dr. Fauci in this situation? Because people have said to me, they're like, you should ask Dr. West. It seems like there's more than one crack pipe going around when he could say these things about Dr. Fauci when he's had a history tied to the pharmaceutical companies, tied to gain of function, tied to Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Foundation. The financial gains of this towards the millionaire class, the billionaire class that came to the COVID-19 is off the charts. So do you want to make a comment about this and try to give us a little insight to what you were thinking and why you said these things?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you raising this question, though, brother, because, what I said was not based on any extensive investigation. I always know that the pharmaceutical companies have a disproportionate role in shaping the public policy. That's what corporate power and what corporate wealth does, be it in one sphere as opposed to another. But I was basing it in part on what I was perceiving in what Brother Fauci was putting forward, given that knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry having that kind of influence. And it was in real time that we were in such crisis. We had to do something, and we needed to have someone who was trying to put forward a view or a set of policies that could push back the disease on the one hand and also try to envision an overcoming of it down the road on the other. I agree with you. I do not believe in censorship. I do not believe in suppressing.
So that's probably good for the sake
that
of
includes
time.
dissenting.
I can kind of summarize the rest of. So,
well, that well, ultimately the position I came away from that was he said he's against mandates. Well, did he make?
Yeah. So he actually okay. So yeah, I'll just summarize kind of the stuff here, but he does come out at the end because he asked about the Green, because obviously with the Green Party has a history of supporting mandates and lockdowns. Cornel West does say in the interview that he is against mandates. He's not completely familiar with like Green Party internal policy and stuff like that, but he is against mandates. He explicitly said that. So as far as COVID, I think where Cornel West is right now is that he like just drank the establishment Kool-Aid, and he does sort of admit that he's a little bit uninformed and that's catching up with him. The thing with Cornel West, as he admitted, because he's running on the Green Party and he's trying to appeal to the populace that are typically Trump supporters, he knows he's going to have to evolve his opinion on COVID. So I'm a little bit optimistic that down the line, he starts showing up on more indie, interviews and stuff like that. He might start opening his eyes a little bit and being a little bit more.
He already said he's going on an RBN once a month.
So I have things to say about that, but
no, I know, and I think people do. I'm saying at least he's open-minded, because clearly in this conversation, he says oh yeah, I might be smoking the crack pipe a little.
Yeah, he does. He admits that he doesn't know everything about it, and that he was basing.
That's what I mean. When you're having an intellectual conversation with someone, versus if you're censoring me and being hostile and want to destroy everything, versus oh, I didn't know that. Tell me more. I'm interested in here. I'm much more willing to respect the latter as opposed to what I hear from.
And that speaks to. So both Cornel West and RFK Jr. are going to show us whether within the next few months, year, whatever, Cornel West, as far as COVID is concerned, we're going to see if he's capable of having some growth. And RFK on the other side, Greenwald seems to think that he's going to be able to come around. But RFK has one of the worst positions on Israel I've seen from any apparatchik as long as I've been alive. Just awful. And we all hope, knock on wood, that RFK goes and does an interview with Max Blumenthal and has like his mind explodes because of the knowledge that will be imparted onto him. So we all hope that these guys are honest actors. You know, we think highly of people like Cornel West, of course, and we think highly of RFK. You know, he is a Democrat, but like, you know, he does show moments of being open to stuff. And I think those two positions, you know, whether it's COVID or Israel, issues that are going to be talked about a lot more as the months go along with these candidates. So this definitely isn't the last that we've seen of them speaking on these topics, and I hope that they both evolve on them, because that's really going to show, you know, where their allegiance is. Like, are they just going to be establishment, you know, or are they going to show growth? Especially with RFK, with the Israel question. If RFK is willing to wake up to Israel, that's going to go a long way. Let's see. So just to summarize, because I don't want to get to the Hotez thing, so we don't have to kind of listen to all that stuff. But so like Pasta kind of harped on him and asked Cornel West, like, do you really think that Fauci was like acting with integrity and acting like in the best interest of people? And Cornel West isn't willing to visit that conspiracy at the moment, that Fauci had bad intentions, even in spite of knowing about it, like, you know, the ache and all that stuff. Pasta also asks him if what were the origins of COVID-19, and, you know, in the effort to try and make sure that this doesn't get taken down, Cornel West is open to any hypotheses that are outside of mainstream as to the origins of COVID-19.
So he's willing to show openness.
He said, yeah, like, I mean, I
can't blame him. Like, he's like an old, like, pastor.
Dude, it's a lot. It's a lot to overcome, you know, especially.
It's a lot. He's a big career.
He admits he admits that he's like, I think he admits in so many words that he was taken in by the establishment narrative, even though you heard him say, he's like, I know that Big Pharma has an outsized influence on media. He still recognizes that, like, he kind of drank the Kool-Aid, but, you know, when we've been drinking that Kool-Aid for so long, you know, it's going to take a lot more than just one journalist to be like, hey, wake the fuck up. So it could be a few months before Cornel West comes around or RFK comes around, so on and so forth, where they're like, wow, like, you guys really showed me.
We're still a year out.
Huh?
We're still a year out.
Yeah, we're still a year out, but I mean, these are questions that are going to be like the COVID question, and the Israel question are going to be really, really, really important questions for them going forward. I think almost more than anything. No one's going to get away. Nobody who's rung against Biden is going to be able to get away from the Israel question. And I think in light of because the only people who supported mandates and lockdowns were the shit libs, obviously, like, that kind of policy stuff is going to be really important going into the next election season as well. So, and then I guess this is a good pivot to go to like the World Economic Forum thing, but Pasta did ask him what his thoughts were on like the World Health Organization.
Yeah, let's play.
Oh, you want to play that one? Okay.
Yeah.
Complicated than what was put forward in the past or even in the present. We'll find out retrospectively, but I'm open to a variety of different views on this issue, my brother.
What do you know about the WHO and the WEF and Klaus Schwab in particular?
I don't want to put forward any kind of judgment until I've had a chance to explore much more exhaustively the evidence and the text, my brother.
That's
I just know
that
as international organizations, they are disproportionately shaped by American corporate interests and American.
You know anything about the?
So that is correct.
He's right, but what he's admitting to is that yes, these organizations get a lot of influence from American corporations, but what he's not saying is that the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum have an outside influence on American policy. So he won't go that far, you know. Which again is another thing that if he's trying to pick up Trump voters, he's going to have to reconcile whether he really thinks that's a conspiracy or not, because that's, you know, you have plenty of QAnon, but like within QAnon, there's still nuggets of truth in there. But he's so, but yeah, do you want to pull up that PDF?
No, I don't know. I just find it really interesting that Himbo linked this in chat, where on page 50 of this World Economic Forum document, they have a quote of Cornel West. So it seems like they respect him. I mean, they don't. He doesn't seem to know who they are.
There's no way he doesn't know who they are. Like, I refuse to believe that.
Is it? I don't know. I really don't know. I really can't cast any judgment. At least not right now. I mean, I have to know more. But the way that he interacted with Fauci in that interview, it was just like Fauci. The way that he recepted it was just like, oh yes, thank you, Dr. West. You know what I mean? Which is like,
yeah,
I guess like the respect you would give to him normally, but it just seems. Whenever I see something coming from Fauci, it just seems so disingenuous that
100%.
I can't like it either way. But we can play the jabs one too if you want to bother. But
the what one?
The last question where he's the jab safe and effective.
Yeah, we can play it if you want, but he does say, like I said, he does mention that he's against mandates, which is important. Obviously, like. That was a Green Party position, and he's saying he's
that's an important part to highlight because that's like really the first position, and you know it's a pretty bottom line. Granted, I know it's a low bar. No forced medical injections.
I know, right? It's a low bar, but
it's a pretty low bar. But at least like we can't even get a Green Party like nominee to have that position. So like at least he has that. Besides Joe
Biden. But yeah, if you want, I mean, you can play it if you want. Otherwise, we can go into the Hotez stuff. But I mean, basically, Cornel West just admitting that he kind of took the establishment position and just ran with it.
Yeah.
And okay, this was also another thing that he said too. He also kind of assumes that well, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to say it because I'm not going to say it. But there's still the cognitive dissonance where there's certain things. We
love the jabs.
There's certain things that people just will not say because they've convinced themselves that they have to be crazy to say otherwise. But he definitely thinks that the jabs were effective to some degree. I can't really say more than that.